Welcome to this section of New Start for the Family. Today we're going to be talking about the T in New Start, which stands for temperance. Now, temperance actually is a critical part in being able to live a healthy and happy lifestyle. In fact, temperance is kind of an old word. It's been around for a while, and so a lot of people may not understand what it means, so I'm just going to go through the definition of it, since it is essential for living healthfully and happily. Temperance is simply this: moderation in the use of healthy substances and abstinence from things that are unhealthy. Now, you might ask the question, why moderation if things are actually healthy? Did you know that you can actually do yourself in by drinking too much water? I've had patients do that. I know one patient that I had with prostate cancer, and he was utilizing some natural therapies that he had learned from the internet and some other sources. And he was drinking well over a gallon of water a day. And he began to feel very weak and down. He actually lived about 100 miles away from us, and his wife called, and he just knew that he was dying from his prostate cancer. And we had her ship him in the car and bring him up to us, and his serum sodium was extremely low, 109, from excessive water drinking. His problem wasn't his prostate cancer at that point. It was just too much of a good thing. And you can get too much sunlight. You can even get too much soy. It's possible. If you eat soybeans all day long, you can get too much. And you can actually over-exercise as well. So all of the New Start principles, you can actually do in excess, take it to extreme, and it becomes unhealthy. Now, the nice thing about the New Start principles is that all of the New Start principles don't have a grip on you where they actually enslave you. They're really all about freedom. So if we do it too much, it's because of our own brain not functioning well enough, or not allowing it to function well enough to be temperate in those things. In regards to the unhealthy, it's a little different story. Now notice, temperance means abstinence from unhealthy substances. You might ask the question, why abstinence from the unhealthy? Particularly complete abstinence. Isn't it okay to do some unhealthy things, on occasion or once in a while? Well, first, why abstinence? Because it is unhealthy. Why voluntarily partake in something that might destroy your health? Or at least take your health down even momentarily. And of course, these things don't have just momentary consequences. They can have long-term consequences. But second, and possibly even more important than this, is because of the addictive nature of unhealthy substances. And that really underscores another addiction that's on the screen, one of the most rapidly rising addictions in the United States, called a technology addiction, where the individual is chained. You would think they are, by the way they act. They're chained to that computer, not doing anything useful, really, although they're doing something that they think they need to do. And at first it's enjoyable, but then they're doing it because they're enslaved. And it's really a sad condition to be in. Well, the call for moderation is what temperance is about. And many people say a person who, it is actually true, a person who has a compulsive relationship can no more use it moderately than an alcoholic can return to moderate drinking, or a nicotine addict can return to moderate smoking. In dealing with any addictive habit, total abstinence for life is necessary. Now that seems cruel on the surface, total abstinence for life. But in reality, it's not a cruel thing, particularly since these things are unhealthy in general. And we have the ability to choose our own pleasures. And by the way, when we talk about moderation, I know I was on a television program recently with a cardiologist from our hospital about a new heart procedure. And he was talking about the procedure, and then they were talking to me about how to avoid ever needing the procedure that the new technology had developed. And I was talking about some things, and then he mentioned on the camera, you know, I believe in moderation in all things. And he said that on the camera as well, and of course, without actually directly contradicting him, I said some things to at least have the viewer think about that a statement and recognize there are things that need to be avoided completely. But after it was through, I said, you know, doctor, and I won't say his last name, but doctor, do you think that it's okay to be a moderate cigarette smoker? He said, oh, no, I wasn't talking about that. And so in reality, even he, when he's pressed, doesn't believe in moderation in all things. There are some things where it's distinctly not good to be moderate in, but to be completely abstinent. But you know, one of the things that we need to understand with temperance, we have the ability to choose our own pleasures. If we reward ourselves with a bad habit periodically, we undermine our ability to develop enjoyment for a lifestyle that is free of that agent. Now, in regards to choosing your own pleasures, did you know that it's possible for you to enjoy food in the future that you do not like today? You know, we have this happen in those that come to the New Start program at Weimar. The first week, often they're not very thrilled about the food. You know, it's enough that they can still sustain themselves. And the second week, they think the cook has changed because the food is far better. And then the third week that they're here, they want to take the cook home with them and say, man, I'd like to eat like this all the time. This is the best food ever. What was happening? The taste buds were changing. And so we have the ability to choose our own pleasures. A lot of things that we enjoy that are harmful, we enjoy because we grew up that way or we're used to it. But you know, once you're away from it for a while, if you do go back to it, it's actually not near as tasty. In fact, sometimes it can be distasteful. So as human beings, we really have that frontal lobe to help us to choose correctly. And if we do choose correctly, we'll actually begin to enjoy those choices. But those that don't believe in the abstinent part will often ask this question: what about once a month? You know, if I do it once a month, is that going to be a problem? Well, it's certainly an improvement, but the desire is being kept alive by doing that and may even be increased, giving rise to feelings of a deep, distressing sense of deprivation. If the focus is really on, if the focus is permanently abandoning the addiction, and the thoughts directed towards the joy of being free, the addiction will soon not be missed. And that's when the individual is indeed free. Because they're not missing it, and they're actually living a far happier lifestyle as a result. Well, let's take a look at some of the common characteristics of addictions. One is an overwhelming compulsion to continually use, as is mentioned or kind of implied there in that picture. That's one of the characteristics that's often present. Need for increased amounts over time. In other words, you can't quite get the satisfaction with lower amounts. Dependence, meaning that if you withdraw from it, you begin to actually suffer some symptoms. High tendency to relapse, meaning if you're off of it even a month or two, there still is a tendency to go back to it and relapse. And then a detrimental effect, either on yourself or the society around you. Now, you may not have all 5 of those with every addiction, but you'll have a majority of them with every addiction. And it's important to understand those characteristics to recognize it. However, one of the things in regards to living a healthy lifestyle and the need to be abstinent from things that are harmful is the look on the face of the patient when I tell them they need to give up something that's addictive. And what they will often think in their own mind, they may not say this, but they'll often think in their own mind, I am different, I need this. This is harmful to most people, and it may be even causing me some harm, but in my case, I need this. And I don't know how I'm going to be able to get by without it and be able to survive and live a happy life. One of the most common substance addiction, in fact, it is the most common substance addiction in the United States, is what? It's a drug. I-N-E is what it ends with, and it is caffeine. And it's not just coffee, it's in Pepsi and Dr. Pepper and Mountain Dew and all of those. And of course, caffeine blocks the adenosine receptors in the frontal lobe, so people that consume it are more likely to gossip than people who don't. It also can cause gastroesophageal reflux disease, increase the risk of all sorts of different problems, including some heart arrhythmias. It certainly increases anxiety, and those sorts of things can be associated with insomnia, and the list goes on and on. A lot of people try to justify their caffeine habit by talking about the cocoa bean and the fact that it's high in antioxidants, which it is. And the world is fascinated with substances that have some benefit and some problems with it, and they continue to go after the problem because of that, quotes, benefit. Why not choose things that are just beneficial and not problematic? But often the question comes up, but I need to be stimulated. You don't realize what I'm like without caffeine. I am a zombie. Well, let's take a look at this recent study. Caffeine addiction is such a downer that regular coffee drinkers get no real pick-me-up from their morning habit. What? This girl thinks she does. Well, Bristol University researchers found that caffeine beverage drinkers develop a tolerance to both the anxiety-producing and the stimulating effects of caffeine, meaning that it only brings them back to baseline levels of alertness, not above them. And it only takes actually a few days for this to happen. This was a nice, prospective, placebo-controlled trial on 379 adults. And the study's author said this: although frequent consumers feel alerted by caffeine, especially by their morning tea, coffee, or other caffeine-containing drink, evidence indicates that this is actually merely the reversal of the fatiguing effects of acute caffeine withdrawal. And this study was done by Peter Rogers and others at Bristol's University Department of Experimental Psychology. But the studies went on to some other conclusions. Measurements showed that the caffeine users' post-caffeine levels of alertness were actually no higher than non-caffeine consumers who received a placebo, suggesting caffeine only brings coffee drinkers back up to, quotes, normal. Well, what does this mean? All the reported benefits of caffeine are present virtually all day, only in those who don't consume it. So in other words, if you want to have the alertness and the energy, and you want it to last not just temporarily but all day, you'll never consume it. That's all of the reported benefits of caffeine are present in those who don't consume it. But when you're in that cycle of addiction, you don't recognize that. You have to get over the addiction. Of course, you're going to be a zombie for a few days. But it comes back relatively quickly, and you can get over that addiction relatively quickly. The headaches will be gone within 3 days in 95% of individuals. And I would encourage you to look at your own life, what you're participating in, what you might be addicted to, what might be harming you, and make some choices to choose to overcome. There are a number of addictions that can lead to physical problems and mental health problems, including depression and anxiety. Alcohol is one of those. And it can cause physical health problems and mental health problems. Well known, also highly addictive. Narcotics, highly addictive. Benzodiazepines. This is your more classier addiction. But these are individuals that won't necessarily drink their alcohol, but they will have to consume their Xanax, or their Ativan, or lorazepam, or these type of drugs. They are addictive. They do cause frontal lobe suppression. That's one of the characteristics of every addiction out there, is it causes that frontal lobe suppression, which is not a good thing. And at first, it can give you that buzz where you feel like you're in absolute peace with the world. But it sets you up for that cycle of addiction, and pretty soon your brain no longer makes GABA, gamma-aminobutyric acid, which means if you don't have a Xanax close by and your brain isn't producing GABA, you'll feel anxious when there's nothing to be anxious about. And the anxiety can be quite significant. Cocaine and amphetamines, quite addictive. Psychologically addictive, can cause physical health problems, mental health problems. How about sugar? Can that be an addiction for some? Yes, it actually can be. And what about this food, chocolate? Anyone want to guess what percent of the female population has an addictive, this is according to the American Psychological Association, what percent of the female population in America is addicted to chocolate? It's actually 40%. It's pretty high, 4 out of 10. And of course, chocolate not only tastes good, it can actually raise your dopamine levels where you have this sense of euphoria as a result. And but unfortunately, there's a nadir that follows, and that cycle of addiction can start. In men, 10% are addicted, so it's much more common in women than men. And many of these addictions do have certain gender tendencies. Gambling, is that more common in women or in men? It's actually very common in both genders, but it's actually more common in men, 2 to 1 men than it is women. Entertainment, television, or movies. Actually, both genders have a very high association with this, and of course it depends on the movie that is being shown in regards to it, or the soap opera, etc. But television, rapid scene of reference TV, which is entertainment TV or movies, are actually highly addictive and have been shown that when you withdraw from it, you have withdrawal symptoms, etc. And many people in this country are starting to catch up with this, and they recognize they need to get away from the screen, but they don't know how to do it. I think we need to start holding 5-day plans for stop watching television today. It might be a lot more people respond since there aren't as many smokers around as there used to be for our 5-day plans there. PSP or video games can be highly addictive. We talked about the techno addict. One of the addictions of a techno addict, one of the telltale signs is they'll be in a room where there's social things going on in this room, but they would choose to communicate with someone by text who's not even there. And that's a sign of a techno addiction. And it, of course, can lead to a number of problems. Internet entertainment can be quite addictive. And one of the things is Facebook. Do you know what the average 15 to 20-year-old, when they're utilizing Facebook, how much Facebook time they are on per day on average here in the U.S.? 3 hours on average. And then they don't have time, you wonder why they don't have time for anything else or for advancement or education. Facebook, 3 hours? That's a problem. We talked about caffeine. Competitive sports can be addictive. And certain types of music, the syncopated rock and roll, this is the boom-cha type rhythm, actually has an addictive relationship. Can make you feel good for the short term, but it can set you up for some long-term problems. And individuals will have anxiety spells, lose their temper, etc., when they don't get it for a while. And it can be a major problem. Of course, you can withdraw from all of these things, fortunately. Pornography. Can that be addictive? Highly addictive. In certain age groups, if you were exposed as a young boy, it can be like cocaine. Cocaine is one of those things where one exposure and you can be hooked. The same can be true for pornography, and studies have been, a lot of studies have been done on pornography, some of them randomized controlled trials, showing indeed that it causes significant emotional problems. Where the individual no longer has, they get apathetic, they no longer are able to have empathy, to truly care about others, and they end up becoming emotional wastebaskets that are basically shut down emotionally as a result. And of course it decreases academic performance and a lot of other problems. Deviant sexual practices as well can be highly addictive. And this sets the individual up to not be able to enjoy a monogamous, regular relationship. That's not satisfying at all to the individuals that have gotten involved in the deviant sexual practices. And then another addiction that is also a rapidly rising addiction among our young people today. Anyone want to guess what that is? It's not on the screen yet. Well, texting, we would call that techno addict. Yeah, the texting. Well, cell phones, that is not as addictive, as far as dialoguing on the cell phone per se. Well, here it is, cutting. This is a self-mutilation, rapidly rising. And people misunderstand this. A lot of people think that the individuals may be suicidal or trying to get attention. It actually is an addiction. They cut themselves, and they see that blood flow, and it's kind of a release. It's like taking a Xanax pill. And so they set themselves up for that cycle of addiction, and pretty soon they've got scars all over the place. And unless it's treated like an addiction, it is not going to be successfully treated, and the individual is not going to be able to overcome it. Tattoos can have an addictive component. You see these individuals where there's hardly normal skin anywhere. That can have that same cycle of addiction that's there. You can get addicted to all sorts of strange things. Of course, that common thread is that frontal lobe suppression that's there. Well, here's what happens to dopamine levels when they first participate in addiction. Let's just act like this is your first experience with chocolate. Never had it before, but now you've been raised in a third world country where it was not available. You come over here to the United States and you're 12 years old and you get your first piece of chocolate. And you know what happens to your dopamine level? It goes up past the high pleasure point, and it actually spikes up to the euphoria part of things. This is where the individual feels happier than they have felt in a long time. And it just tasted so good, and now their brain chemistry is saying, this is great. And then in a short period of time, the effect wears off. But the dopamine level just doesn't go back to neutral. It goes slightly less than neutral. And the individual remembers that effect. And of course, the very next meal or the next time they have opportunity, they want to participate in it again. But it actually doesn't go up quite as high as it did the first time. The individual remembers that high of the first time, but it's not quite as high. It's a little bit less than that. And the individual says, hey, this is still great. This is much more pleasure than I'm normally feeling. But pretty soon, it's down to even a little less. Then another spike occurs when the person participates in it. But again, not quite as high as the first time, and pretty soon it's down to even less. And after the individual has repeated this like 50 to 100 times, where do you think that curve is? What happens is the individual is now down in the deep sadness aspect of things when there's nothing to be sad about. They now eat chocolate, but now they're not just eating a little piece. They're eating a whole Hershey bar, and it gets them up to neutral. And then, unfortunately, it starts to go down pretty frequently again. And it will stay down until the individual participates in the habit again, at least until they've completely withdrawn. And so they participate in it again, and it just takes them up to neutral. This is why many individuals feel sad and depressed when there's nothing sad or depressing going on in their life. They have that addictive relationship, and they think they need their addiction in order to feel normal. And it's a sad state of affairs to be in. It's really a false way of altering the way you feel. And what we need to understand about the false ways of altering the way we feel, you can never get enough of what you don't need. Do you need any of these addictions? Is caffeine an essential nutrient? No, it isn't. Is saturated fat and sugar an essential nutrient with cocoa? Absolutely not. Is pornography essential? No. You can never get enough of what you don't need. By the way, the New Start principles, you can get enough. There's freedom in that. You can get enough and you can be satisfied, but you need to recognize what you don't need will never satisfy you. It's never going to bring that long-lasting satisfaction. Well, let's take a look at the alternative way of getting happiness. CNN touched on it recently when they reported the next time you're deciding between ice cream and cake, buying a car or taking a trip to Europe, accepting a new job or keeping your old one, you should remember two things. First, your decision is rooted in the desire to become happy, or at least happier than you are now. Second, there's a good chance the decision you make will be wrong. Why is that? Harvard psychologist Daniel Gilbert summed up our failings this way. People have a lot of bad theories about happiness. Our culture employs us to buy bigger, newer, better things, but research shows stuff does not buy happiness. By and large, money buys happiness only for those who lack the basic needs. Once you pass an income of $50,000, more money doesn't buy more happiness. With that in mind, Siegel said, we should pass on buying lottery tickets and find small things we can do every day that bring us joy, whether it's going for a walk, cooking a meal, or reading a good book. What happens when we participate in these type of activities, like taking a nice walk around the Weimar campus? You get that level above neutral. You get up into high pleasure. And instead of it going down, it stays there for a while. So, both groups are getting their dopamine. But one group is getting it in a healthy way, and it stays up for quite a while, and it just gradually comes down. And it doesn't go down less than neutral. It just comes down to neutral. Now, individuals like this, they can get a lot of satisfaction about watching a beautiful sunset with the fresh air and the breeze there. People that are in the cycle of addiction, they'll see others get joy from a sunset, and they'll look at it and say, it's not doing anything for me. I don't know why this individual's so excited about it. Now, they won't actually say that. That's what they're thinking in their mind. They'll say in their mind, oh, yeah, that's nice. But you can tell they're not getting any benefit out of that whatsoever. And often that's due to the fact that they have been in the cycle of addiction. So I would encourage you to choose these small things every day that are part of the New Start principles to participate in positive change. And then go through the 4 stages of change. 1 is unconsciously incompetent. This is before you knew the New Start information. There were things that you were doing that you may not have known were unhealthy. And now you recognize they are unhealthy. And as a result, you've already moved to stage 2. That's when you're consciously incompetent. You now are conscious that you're incompetent. But don't stay in stage 2. You need to go to stage 3 where you are consciously competent. That's when you put into practice the positive lifestyle principles and get rid of the bad habits. And if you stay in 3 long enough, you'll then get to unconsciously competent. That means where it's no longer a struggle. It's not something that's on your mind. It's just part of your everyday habits. You're experiencing the benefit of it, and you're experiencing a joy and satisfaction and a freedom, really, that you have not experienced before. So I encourage you today to make healthy choices last for good. Thank you very much.